Hmm. Hmm. So, hello. This is Donna from Love Consciousness, and I have been feeling called to continue on posting live around the subject of claiming your divine sovereignty. So this is the third video I've made on this subject. So if you haven't checked out number 1 and 2, then perhaps you should. And the area that I'm going to just talk into and feel into today is responsibility. Um, Responsibility is a big one. I don't know exactly where this is going to go. I haven't planned this. But I have a feeling that there may be let's just say I'll just put a trigger warning at the start of this video because there may be content that I discuss that might bring up triggers. Claiming your divine sovereignty and why it's important to step into a place of taking responsibility for yourself. That includes taking responsibility for your creation, your reality creation. It's a huge one, and on my journey, particularly going back sort of 3 or 4 years, it became very, very clear to me what was being presented to me when I was doing my medicine journeys and things like that, and really beginning to open up, was this idea, that a big part of my life lessons, if you like, was to take responsibility. And, most of you already know, and I've shared it very openly, that I did suffer from depression for many, many years, I think 20 years in total. And one of the things that comes part and parcel with depression is being a victim. I was very much the victim, and I very much blamed my sadness, my insecurities, my lack, my inability to just be balanced in day-to-day things on my previous experiences, and particularly my parents. And the day or the time in my life when I finally overcame my depression, I had a massive realization. And I heard someone say, and I can't remember who it was some kind of quote, and it was, the minute you become the victim, you hand over all of your power. And something landed when I heard that, because it made complete sense that while I was staying in that victim mentality, I had handed all of my power over to something else, to an external source. And so that was very much the start for me of beginning to take responsibility. So beginning to realize to begin with that, I may have gone through some difficult times in my life. I may have been in difficult and challenging situations which contributed to the emotional repression that manifested itself in symptoms of depression. But this stuff happened sort of 20 years ago, and I wasn't going to be able to overcome the depression and the repressed emotions whilst I was staying in that victim mentality and blaming the world and blaming my parents and blaming everything else outside of me. And so it was the beginning for me of really beginning to say, actually, I'm an adult now. I'm responsible for my own thoughts and my own feelings. And if I want to shift out of this, I have to take responsibility for that. And I have to take the steps and the actions in order for me to move out of that space. And that's what I did. And in doing so, that was the start of me overcoming my depression. So, that was one step towards taking responsibility. It's a huge, huge subject. So again, just remembering that when we come into our full sovereignty, what we're doing is we're creating our own space, you know, and I mentioned in the first video about the pillar. So for me, creating that pillar and beginning to get the message from my higher guidance, which was very clear, was know your space. Do you know your space? You know, your space being you, your consciousness, without it being interacted with or interfered with in any way, energetically with any other being that's external to you. And part of that knowing your space is understanding what you are engaging with, what you're connecting with energetically, what are you consuming. You know, I mentioned this too, you know, what are you consuming day to day energetically? And that's what are you interacting with? What are you giving permission to day energetically in your interactions? What are you agreeing to? Because when you're agreeing to it, you're bringing that in. You're quantumly entangling with that energy, and that is going to affect your pillar, your space. And so taking responsibility is, again, bringing everything to what we've experienced it in reverse. We've been living in an inverted system. Everything's inside out. We have come into this experience as a human being with amnesia, forgetting who we are and what we are, and that we are in fact creator beings. And we have been feeling and largely thinking that life is happening to us rather than life happening through us. And so if we don't take responsibility for the fact that things are being created through us, we can never create that shift, not only in our own experience of our personal reality creation, but then also understanding that on a wider scale that we are feeding into the collective reality creation as well. So when you begin to take responsibility, as I said, there's many layers to that. There's many levels of kind of realizations and understandings. Because to begin with, at least in my experience, it's really, really difficult for you to take responsibility if your life is a shit show. And to be perfectly honest, my life was a shit show. And it was really convenient for me to not take responsibility, for me not to realize that I was co-creating my existence, my experience of reality. So again, it was a process of being able to understand bit by bit, layer by layer, taking more and more responsibility as I went along, as I embodied more of this understanding that in fact it was all, you know, all of it is being generated through me, and understanding the elements and the layers and what that actually means. So I'll try to speak into it a little bit again from my own experience. I never try to say that, you know, what I'm saying is fact. And we're all on our own journeys and we're all going to embody these things in our own way. I just share my experiences because I feel that they may be helpful. And it's just to give you something to think about, I guess, to consider, to explore. So obviously I've mentioned the first steps. So, you know, things like if you have mental illness, if you have deep rooted emotional trauma, if you're really, really imbalanced within yourself, that's not going to shift for you really until you actually just take on the responsibility of that it's actually your role to create that shift, to take the steps that you need to take in order to make that change within yourself. And it's a really, really difficult one because when we're stuck in trauma and we're stuck in really, really deeply repressed emotions, that's how it feels. We're quite literally stuck. And so it can take a great amount of effort, you know, in some ways to push through that, to just begin to make the steps to begin to shift and change. And of course, first of all, we have to realize that we are the only ones You know, we are the only ones that can actually make that change, that can begin to step into making that transition within ourselves. And so, you know, begin to make that shift and that change, and begin to find ways in which you can release these repressed emotions, these traumas, these aspects of us that are really fractured. If you imagine our consciousness as a whole, you know, and that would be what I would describe as the unified field of love. We're consciously unified as an individual being, but because we've been living in an inverted system, our consciousness has been fractured. You know, there's bits of our consciousness that are not in wholeness, that are not connected to the unified field of love, which is what I see love consciousness as. And so we have this task when we want to claim our sovereignty of bringing ourselves back together. And that includes, you know, taking the responsibility that, you know, we must do that for ourselves. Nobody's going to do that for you. It's your responsibility to begin to look inside and look at what aspects of you are fractured, are inverted, are still looking outside of yourself for, you know, some kind of savior, someone to come and save you, someone to come and do it for you. Because, you know, the reality of it is that we have set this journey for ourselves, and we must do the work, the process of moving through that, integrating back into wholeness, in order for us to actually really begin to embody more and more of our higher states of awareness, our higher consciousness. So just remembering that this body is a vehicle. This body might appear solid, but it's not really solid. Everything is consciousness, everything is energy. And so your consciousness is coming into a body that is made of consciousness. And within this body that is consciousness, you hold all of these patterns. You know, if you think about all of the ancestral lines throughout all of time that you have been connected to, that you are connected to, sorry, what patterns do you hold within your physical being that haven't been broken yet, that haven't been overcome, that haven't been released? And so on some level, because these patterns are within this body, and the consciousness that you are is streaming through this body, those patterns are always going to be very much part of your reality creation on some level, until you acknowledge that. And so that's part of responsibility, just understanding that you may not have created, like personally, this isn't a personal thing. This is about moving beyond the personality. You may not have personally created that pattern, but on some level, before you came in to the system, you understood the patterns in which you were going to embody. And I've said this before, I honestly, you know, it's been shown to me so many times, and I can't speak for anyone else, but for myself, a big part of my purpose, at least up until now, was moving into this body, coming in to this body and clearing those patterns, for myself, clearing those patterns for the collective. And that is a hard job to take on. It's not easy, you know, it's not easy to actually allow yourself to acknowledge that these are part of you, that some of these really dark, dense, sticky, gooey things that make us feel really, really constricted, you know, and stuck, that they are part of us. And can we take on the responsibility of acknowledging that? Because when we do, we can then begin to do, as I said, do the work to allow those patterns to be released, you know, transmuted, integrated back into wholeness. It's all energy. Energy doesn't change. Energy doesn't disappear. What we're actually doing is we are transmuting, we're alchemizing the energy to bring it back into wholeness, so that we're not carrying so much density. We're not carrying so much of these inverted patterns that are keeping us connected into an inverted system. You know, some people, you know, you might have heard, like, you know, escape from the matrix, you know, break free from the matrix and all of this kind of stuff. But what that really means is that humanity for, you know, a few millions of years have been in an inverted system, a system where the masculine energy and the feminine energy, instead of being unified, the unified field of love and wholeness, they have been split. And that is why it's a dual, it's a system made up of duality. And really what we're doing is we move through this process and we take that responsibility that these inverted, these very dualistic energies exist within us, and we bring them back into unity. We reconnect them to the divine matrix, the divine architecture, the unified field of love governed by the sacred law of one. We're doing this bit by bit. You know, we can't do it all in one go. We hold a lot of patterns, you know, they're stored in every aspect of our being. They're stored within our bones. They're stored within our muscles, you know, and we're releasing them bit by bit. We're reintegrating them. We're bringing them back into unity, back into wholeness. And it's a massive, massive process that we're moving through. Massive, massive process of transformation, of transfiguration, to eventually, you know, I feel, to come back to the remembering of what we truly are. You know, to come back to the remembering that we are the creators, you know, having an experience in a human form. And that we're at a time in history where we are going through that massive, you know, accelerated transfiguration from being connected to an old system, which has been inverted, where we have felt separated, where we have felt alone and isolated and experienced all of what separation brings, and being part of a dualistic system brings, to reintegrating back in to wholeness and remembering, and, you know, going back to that pillar, going back to understanding your space, you know, and protecting that space, and understanding where you are giving permission, and what you're consuming, what energy you're consuming, because everything you consume, you're putting into your reality creation, and that is going into the collective reality creation. And taking responsibility for that. Can you take responsibility for that? Can you take responsibility that you are feeding into a creation that is not serving you any longer? Can you take responsibility that you are feeding into a collective creation that is not serving humanity? I mean, just look at the world. It's absolutely chaos. The way that human beings have been living are not good for our soul at all. Every system on this planet has got to crumble. And these systems are representatives of the patterns that we hold inside. So as we crumble, you know, as we dismantle these systems that we have built in and around our energy, the systems on the outside will also begin to weaken and crumble, because, you know, everything's inside out. Reality is just you know, like a video, a representation of our inner worlds. It's all on the inside. So the more we come into our sovereignty, and the more we come into our own energy fields and our own pillars, and we stop all of that interference coming in, and we take responsibility for our own creation, we begin to create from our own energy source. which is a pure energy source rather than a distorted energy source. So we stop recreating those loops that we continuously go round and round and round in. We break those patterns. We break them for ourselves, we break them for our children, we break them for humanity as a whole. But responsibility, you know, is massive. And if you're still looking outside of yourself for the answers, what you're really doing is you're saying that there's a greater authority than you. So again, it's that giving your power, forgetting who you are, forgetting that you have all the answers inside of you and that you are the creator. And you're giving your power to a greater authority, something outside of you. You know, if you won't take responsibility for your creation and your life, that might be a shit show. You know, how can you possibly begin to alchemize that energy and begin to create from your own source, rather than looping round in this inverted energy that we've been looping round in for millions of years? So let's say, for example, you're in a situation with another being, and that being says something to you, and you feel deeply triggered. Do you blame that other being? Do you say, you triggered me? Or do you understand that you have been triggered because you hold a wound inside of you, that really all that other being's done is agitated that wound? And really it's a way of allowing you to, it's like you could use the other being like they've pointed in the direction of what you still need to heal within yourself. And so we can use triggers as a way of deepening our self-healing, knowing that it's a pattern within us that we still have yet to release and reintegrate back into wholeness. It's not easy, you know, it's not always easy to take full responsibility of your creation, you know, if your life is extremely difficult. It also takes real courage. You know, it takes courage to step into your sovereignty full stop, because you have to change, you have to grow, you have to let go of all that you are not. You have to unbecome what you are not, all of the constructs and personas that you created, and to navigate this inverted system that we have been part of. So when you take responsibility for that, you know, like when you finally take responsibility and acknowledge that you do have to play your part in that, that no one else is going to come and save you. You are the one you have been waiting for. You know, it can be difficult, because as we begin to shift and change, it can rock our foundation. It can rock our life in a big way. And I know that if I go back to, you know, I might go back 7 or 8 years now, and I was having moments of realization of this. But when I looked at how much of my life was based on this inverted structure, it was way too overwhelming for me. It was scary. I just closed myself down again. I wasn't ready to take that kind of responsibility. I wasn't ready to leave the shit relationship. Or the relationship that I knew wasn't really right for me. It wasn't good for my soul growth. I wasn't ready to, you know, exit that job that wasn't feeding my soul. You know, I wasn't ready to speak my truth. I wasn't ready to speak my truth. I was scared that people would think I was crazy. And so it takes a certain amount of bravery, because when you take responsibility, the structures in your personal environment, in your personal creation, will begin to weaken and crumble. And I feel that this needs to happen. And, you know, there's no rush. It doesn't all need to happen at once. We can move through it in a way that feels right for us. But I feel that that's one of the reasons why we shy away from responsibility, because when we look at our lives and we look at our reality creation, we realize how much of our consciousness and how much of our lives is based on um, the falsehoods, the non-truths, the inverted systems, the duality, the codependency, the traumas, just needing to feel safe, really. So it's quite a big subject again. These are all big subjects, you know. I'm trying to just present them to you in a way that that hopefully you can digest it. And as I said, it just gives you something to explore. I could go so much deeper into these subjects, and I probably will at some point. You know, I could go into, for example, really, you know, looking at life being a mirror, and you know, even some of the most vile, negative, gooey, what we might call awful situations that that we experience. You know, I could go into how we are part creating that, but it's too much, you know, to begin with. Um, you know, really just focusing on, are you actually taking responsibility for your life? Are you still in victim mentality? Are you still blaming the world? Are you still blaming other people? Are you blaming your partner? Are you blaming your parents? Are you ready to take on the responsibility of knowing that the only person that can actually heal you is you? You need to begin taking those steps. If you're already on that journey of healing, then amazing, great. Are you ready to take the next step and let go of the things, the job, the people, the, you know, whatever it is that you know are still part of that inverted system that aren't really serving you? Um, and so you're taking it step by step, and coming into greater and greater realizations as you take it step by step, to really come into that point again, as I said, where you can take full responsibility for your reality creation, where you can learn boundaries, where you can stop feeding into the system that isn't serving you or anyone else, where you can stop giving permission to other people to drain your energy resources because they've forgotten that they've got their own energy supply, and everything else. So responsibility. Mm. So if you've watched this live, thank you for making it this far. Um, Whatever you're doing, wherever you are, sending you lots and lots of love. Bye bye for now.